Hello, universe, and welcome to the Film Examiner. I am Kingsley Martin, and tonight's examination is going to be of the film The Heat, starring Sandra Bullock, Melissa McCarthy, directed by Paul Feig, and written by Katie Dippold. So, let's just start by saying this movie came out this weekend, the weekend of June 28th, 2013, and the basic story is a buddy cop comedy. Essentially, Sandra Bullock is a straight-laced FBI agent who does everything by the book, who is sent to Boston to track down this drug lord, and in the process becomes partners with this brash Boston cop played by Melissa McCarthy. They go through tons of things, because this movie is almost 2 hours, and learn to care about each other. Obviously, this is actually a pretty cliche type of film. There's no major surprises in this film as far as the way it's designed. They do try and throw in a little surprise at the end, but it's not like you actually care about there being a surprise. As a matter of fact, this film feels every minute of its 2 hours, 116 minutes, and it felt every minute of it. The story, as I've said, is pretty cliche, and really there's not much to say about it. You've seen it a ton of times in movies about, the mismatched partners and how they deal with each other. The performances in this film, Sandra Bullock is actually very strong in the beginning of the film in her particular role, because she seems very true and honest. The beginning of the film actually starts off looking like it's going to be kind of a 70s throwback film, but it quickly drifts out of that and suddenly starts having rap and Journey and and classic rock. It has this huge hodgepodge of things. It started out, actually, I thought it was really going to be interesting because I thought it was going to be sort of a 70s style, almost a Cagney and Lacey type of film, but it quickly drifted away from that theme that it started, that style that it started off with. Now, like I said, on performances, Sandra Bullock is very strong in the beginning of this film, playing the straight-laced FBI special investigator who does everything by the book, and who's obviously very sharp and knows exactly what she's doing in her job. When she gets to Boston and starts meeting up with Melissa McCarthy's character is just very unbelievable. And I know it's a comedy, so of course there's supposed to be things that are beyond reason, but she's unbelievable to the point that you can't even suspend disbelief enough to think she would be employed. She's violent, she pulls guns on, pedestrians or public citizens in general. She goes after people when she's not supposed to. She's incredibly abusive in her job. I mean, it's not a realistic display of what a police officer should be in any kind of a capacity. And because of the way her character is created, she doesn't seem in any way, she destroys the entire concept of realism from this film for me in the very, very beginning. The only funny people in the segments with Melissa McCarthy in the early parts is performances by a number of actors, including Marlon Wayans and Thomas F. Wilson, as well as Michael Rapaport as her brother. Those are really the three best actors engaged with her in scenes that do not necessarily involve, or when it does not involve, Sandra Bullock. To me, this is basically Melissa McCarthy playing the same role she did in Identity Theft, but this time she's not a thief, she's a cop. But there's really no difference, because she's still violent and aggressive, and they allow Melissa McCarthy to go off so much in this movie in ad-libs that every other word out of her mouth is basically foul language, because she can't come up with improv without throwing in the F-bomb all of the time. And to me, that makes it seem really silly. It really doesn't make it funny. People were laughing. There was a lot of people in the theater laughing behind me, and I was baffled by the fact that people found this movie funny. I love a good, silly, zany comedy, but you don't set it up with this concept that it's going to have some suggestion of realism in it, and then expect people to buy it when there's someone who's overly, ridiculous. Her police captain is scared of her. Like, they won't even touch her perps because they're not allowed to. And it's really not realistic. Anything in this sort of a situation, this character would have not even been employed. In a real situation, the reason you can't believe it is because she wouldn't be employed. She would have been already tried and kicked off the police force, if not already in jail. It just completely breaks the realism aspect of this entire film, and to me it kills it. And that and the fact that she's constantly going off with monologues about everything. Well, how about I just put your head in this door and slam it 157,000 fucking times? It's not funny. It's really not funny. And it almost seems like hyena laughter behind me because people are going, it's not funny just because she uses the F-bomb and starts talking about ridiculous things on a constant basis and throwing out ad-libs. I mean, it's great for Mad TV, okay? See, that's where she comes from. Melissa McCarthy is from Mad TV, and it's great for Mad TV, but when you're in a movie and you're going there, you don't want to see 2 hours of her doing constant monologues. And there's really nothing redeeming about her character. She's the one, in the end, as a matter of fact, the movie is basically portrayed as though she's the one who's got the right idea, and Sandra Bullock's character shouldn't be doing it. She should change to her kind of a way, which is basically aggressive and doesn't follow the rules, and who basically barely gets through situations. And she's supposed to be street smart, but she doesn't come across as smart in any kind of capacity because she's brash and she's just too aggressive. And it really damages the movie a lot by the way that they let her go off. Now, I don't completely blame Melissa McCarthy. I think she should have tried to make her character very different from the character in Identity Thief. I really do. She thinks she should have put some effort into it. It would have shown a lot better for her. But basically, they hired her and they said, okay, we want you to be crazy and wacky and ad-lib when you need to and do all this sort of stuff and go ahead and we don't mind. Just be you. And what happened was it turned it into a cluster of stupidity, non-humorous stupidity. The director of this film really didn't do anything outstanding. I'm not going to say that the cinematography was bad, but as far as the direction is concerned, this director really didn't know what he was doing. Now, he's come from directing shows like The Office and some Parks and Recreation. He's got a number of titles under his belt, but nothing that's terribly impressive. This is Paul Feig, by the way, the director. He's done a lot of things, but he directed a movie recently. He directed Bridesmaids. That was a very successful film. I haven't seen Bridesmaids, but see, the concept of Bridesmaids is very different from a buddy comedy cop movie, because Bridesmaids is zany, crazy, wacky stuff with women. This is not the place for that kind of crazy, wacky stuff. You can still have humor in it and bizarre behavior, but when they're constantly just doing things that would not even have them employed, it loses it. It doesn't make it realistic. It doesn't make it to where you can suspend disbelief because you're like, no, there's no way that would happen. The part of a good movie that's a comedy is when you can suspend disbelief, and he did not do a good job of suspending disbelief. He should have reined back Melissa McCarthy and let her have her moments, but it didn't stop letting her have moments. She was constantly doing her shtick. And the shtick damaged this film in a lot of ways, and the director's responsible for that ultimately because he should have reined Melissa McCarthy in, or cut out a lot on the editing floor. But he just sort of said, okay, Melissa McCarthy, minute, here you go crazy. And that was pretty much the gist of the way he directed Melissa McCarthy in a lot of ways. I don't really believe he really directed anyone in this film overly well. Sandra Bullock, I think, did her best to survive in this whole film, but at the end, her character does start to deteriorate and lose what made her interesting as a character, which was she was straight-laced, she was by the book, and in the end it might have been somewhat redeeming if they had her character teach Melissa McCarthy's character something, but in the end it ended up being Melissa McCarthy that was supposed to be teaching her not to be up so uptight. And they're basically calling her life boring, the Sandra Bullock character of Ashburn. Melissa McCarthy's character is Mullins, and Mullins basically, as the movie goes forward, basically breaks down and says how Ashburn's life is boring and doesn't really amount to anything, and she's constantly making vagina jokes. It's just about how there must be, spiders and all kinds of things going on in Ashburn's vagina because she's just too uptight. And by the end, the character of Ashburn has completely broken free of being this smart and precise and, thoughtful FBI agent to suddenly just becoming essentially kind of slutty and broken down and really just follows any leadership that Melissa McCarthy's character brings, and that's very disappointing. Bad direction, and also it says a lot. It doesn't say a lot for the script. The lady who wrote this script actually has already been signed on to write The Heat 2, which I will not be seeing by any means. She also wrote. What else did she write? She wrote for Mad TV is pretty much what she wrote for the most. She was a series writer on Mad TV. And she was on there for most of it. And I'm sure her shtick worked for Mad TV, but not when you get into a movie like this. This is a problem I've talked about before in some of my other videos about how what works on television doesn't necessarily work on movies. And this is where this film falters, because it's really a TV zany woo thing in the movies, and it fails in so many ways to me. The cinematography, nothing really great. At the beginning, I thought it actually was about to have a style, which I was really excited about, where it was sort of a 70s throwback style, but it quickly drifted away from that and just became shot after shot of madness. Now, this movie only cost about $43 million, and I'd like to say that for the budget that they had for $43 million, it was pretty damn remarkable what they pulled off for $43 million. The car crashes, this and that, especially considering how much most movies nowadays cost. I think the $43 million was actually a pretty shocking budget, and that's according to IMDb. But the cinematography captured what was going on, but I don't know that it gave it a style, and I think that's what was missing, is it was missing a style. Costuming, really, the costuming was very minimalistically put effort into. That's correct. It didn't put a lot of effort into the costuming of the film. The soundtrack had a lot of great music on it, but it also had some really unnecessary type of music. Once again, I kept talking about how Melissa McCarthy constantly is dropping. When she's allowed to ad-lib, Melissa McCarthy becomes this F-bomb, 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 F-bomb. That's what she becomes. She's just blithering of nothing but ad-libs filled with the F word, and while she's trying to come up with something funny to say. And as a result of it, the music also has this thing, and I thought it was Nicki Minaj, but it's not, and thank God for Nicki Minaj not being the soundtrack to this film. I actually have more respect for her not being a soundtrack person of this film, because whoever was doing the rapping in this film wasn't good at all. And it was just this attempt to be, brazen. The whole film was supposed to be suggesting that people in Boston are brazen. Well, doesn't say much for Boston if you're going to try and make it to where everybody in Boston's brazen. Well, actually, not everyone. Melissa McCarthy's brazen. Everybody else just kind of falls at her feet because they're scared of her. This woman would have never made it, just based on realistic aspects of society, she would have never even made it into the police force. She would have probably been in prison because she's overly violent. This movie just falls apart. It falls apart. It has such potential and concept at the beginning to be a classic sort of buddy movie, but this time with females, and then it deteriorates because Melissa McCarthy ad-libs overboard. It's just overboard. And by the end of the movie, Melissa McCarthy is supposed to be the one who's teaching Sandra Bullock how not to be so uptight, when Sandra Bullock is actually the one who has training and proper training. I mean, it's just, it loses it. It loses it in every way. Story-wise, obviously very cliche, and as a result of it, this doesn't get more than a 2 on story. Then we get down to the performances. Sandra Bullock is actually really strong in the beginning of this movie. Melissa McCarthy, it's not completely Melissa McCarthy's fault, but she should have put effort in as a performer to try and make her character very different from Identity Thief, and she failed at that because it's pretty much the same character or same personality type. Just now she's playing a cop instead of playing a thief. The only redeeming character aspect of her is supposed to be that she loves her family, but in the end, it doesn't seem genuine. Her performances and her feelings about her brother and the way she's supposed to feel about him and the way the script is supposed to suggest the way she feels about him, Melissa McCarthy can't pull it off. She's just not capable of that kind of performance at this point. I don't think that she's bad. I do think Melissa McCarthy has potential, but I think the only way to make Melissa McCarthy successful in a long-term sense is to not always make her be the crazy ad-lib monster that's just brash and brazen. Because I've heard reviews where people say she's, is she going to eventually become annoying? Not yet. I'm sorry. She became annoying in Identity Thief. And when this movie came out and I saw this film, she was annoying. I didn't want her to speak in the movie. I wanted her to shut up after her first 5 minutes because she would not stop saying things that were just so ridiculous and out of context and character for someone on a police force. She just didn't make any sense. So Melissa McCarthy's performance is definitely very poor in this one. Sandra Bullock's performance, like I said, was strong at the beginning and kind of faltered. So that the two major people being so weak in an overall sense really destroys the movie. The other characters, pretty much hit or miss. Marlon Wayans actually has a pretty good performance as, I'm not exactly sure what you'd call his particular title in his character role, but he was basically a supplier of information to Melissa McCarthy and Sandra Bullock, and he plays off this flirtation thing with Melissa McCarthy, or not Melissa McCarthy, but Sandra Bullock actually fairly well. The captain, played by Thomas F. Wilson, who, if you don't know who Thomas F. Wilson is, it's time to get reacquainted with classic film history, because Thomas F. Wilson, he used to go by Tom Wilson, is the guy who played Biff Tannen in all the Back to the Future movies. And he actually does a really good job in this, even though he has a very brief appearance in it. For the most part, he does a very good job in this. Michael Rapaport as Jason, Melissa McCarthy, or Mullins' brother, he does actually a pretty good job. In a lot of ways, all these characters are not overplayed by people except Melissa McCarthy. And as a result of her being so way up here and them being here, it destroys the mood of the picture in a lot of ways. If she had been here and they had been here, it would have been different. Or if they had brought them up a little bit more in zaniness, then it would have probably worked. But she's so far overboard among everybody else that she destroys a lot of the realism of the picture because of that. And once again, that's a directing fault, which we'll get into directing. The directing in this film did not really do a great job. And I respect directors, but I feel like this guy walked through this job. He said, okay, I got a job. I'm working on The Heat, and I'm going to direct The Heat, and then Melissa McCarthy, and I just let her do her thing, because everybody wants to see Melissa McCarthy do her thing. So do your thing, Melissa, and then, and I'll just put it together in the editing room. And it's just, what? What? Were you awake on set? What was the style you were going for in this picture? So the direction in this picture is very bad. I'm going to say it's probably around a 2 as well. The performances, the supporting cast saved this movie in a lot of ways as far as performances are concerned. So let me say in performances I'll give them about a 3 because the supporting cast really saves this. Marlon Wayans being probably the best one to save the picture. And Thomas F. Wilson definitely does his part, and Michael Rapaport does his part. They all do. Those three are probably the strongest of the cast in the way that they do their job, their performances. Cinematography, nothing outstanding here. Mediocre, 2.5. Music, while it had a lot of great hodgepodge variety to it, around a 3. Some of the music just a movie, in my opinion, needs to have a style that sort of comes together, and just a hodgepodge stew of music sort of damages it. So they need to follow a style and sort of keep with that style throughout it, and it can evolve, but it really wasn't as though there was a style in the beginning of the movie and then it became different, because as a matter of fact, if you think about it, in the end, in the end, Melissa McCarthy is still brash and, arrogant and just goes, by impulse. And in the beginning, the movie is very much like that. You could call that rap very impulsive, on in the moment, not really thinking about consequence. But then in the end of the movie, the music sort of shifts in some ways, and to get classic music in there from Journey and all these people, and it really starts to become a thoughtful thing and a thoughtful sort of spirit. But Melissa McCarthy's character has not changed, so in other words, there's not really an evolution. The music does not evolve from the beginning to the end, and showing how she has evolved as a character. She doesn't really evolve. She stays the same way. The only one who is supposed to be changing or evolving is Sandra Bullock's character. And as a matter of fact, she's de-evolving to the point where she's not really even a good agent anymore, because she falls in line with someone who really doesn't follow procedure and really doesn't respect the responsibility that she has as a police officer. So once again, I'm telling you that the movie should have been a lot more realistic in a lot of ways. Costuming, nothing outstanding here. 2.5, wasn't here nor there. So overall, this movie is really about a 2.5 out of 5, which to me is a bomb of a film. It could have been a lot better. It should have been a lot better. It had so much potential going into what you could do and the franchise you could create with Melissa McCarthy and Sandra Bullock and these two characters. Sort of a reboot of the Cagney and Lacey kind of theory, but with Melissa McCarthy being unleashed in this picture, the way she does constant shtick, it really damages what this movie could have been ultimately, and I'm really disappointed in that. So that is my review, my examination of, really, autopsy of The Heat with Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy, with special appearances by Michael Rapaport, Marlon Wayans, and Thomas F. Wilson. Those three guys did a great job in this movie. And Sandra Bullock did great in the beginning, and Melissa McCarthy has potential. Just rein it in. Rein it in. Okay, and know when to use it, because there's great times to use it. And she did have funny lines. Rein it in. Alright, thanks for joining me on this episode of Film Examiner. Hope you enjoyed the review, and if you didn't, feel free to leave comments below. Tell me why you think I'm wrong. Leave video responses below. Tell me what your opinion is of The Heat and why you think I'm wrong about this review, or why you think I'm right. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Film Examiner. Take it easy.